Hello and welcome to another pen video from me, Penultimate Dave. So I have here another inks comparison video, and this is my favourite blue inks comparison number 2 video. So I think with that, let's go and swab up some of these inks. So I get a lot of questions on how I do these ink videos. So I decided I would add this to the front of each of the ink videos. I put links in the description, but I know some of you watch this on TVs or mobile devices, so you don't get to see this. So first off, the paper is the number one question I get asked. What paper do I use for these ink comparison videos? So this is the original Tomoe River. This is 52 GSM, and it is the white, not the cream, the white. Where possible, I try to go for the white because the cream can actually change the color of the ink just a little bit. So this is Tomoe River 52 GSM in the white. A lot of people get confused as well because I have what looks to be a grid on this page, and it's actually an Oxford Optik pad. These are the pads that I actually use when I'm writing my writing samples for pen reviews or in my currently ink. So they have these little squares up here. I just use that because it's a good guide for me when I put this very thin sheet of Tomoe River over. I can actually see squares, so it helps me write a little bit sort of straight on the page. Not always, but sometimes it does. The other thing that I also have is I have a bottle of water, plain water, and I dip my nib in here. So for consistency, I use the same fountain pen, or I guess it's not a fountain pen, it's using a fountain pen nib though. This is a 3D printed pen from William Shakour in the UK. So he prints this material 3D, and it has a number 8 size Bock nib which I can unscrew, and you can see there. So it is just a dip pen holder for a number 8 size Bock nib, and the idea is I want to have consistency with the writing sample. So I use this, I dip it in the ink, I write, and then I will dip it in here and I will rinse the nib off several times and I will dry it, and then at that point I will then go on to do the next ink swatch and the next writing sample. So there you have it. That's how I do my ink swatches. So I just wanted to show you that here. Now on to the ink comparison video. Now the first ink here is a Rohrer and Klingner ink, and it is Rohrer and Klingner Blue Mare. So we'll do an ink swatch, and this is a very lovely light blue ink. Sometimes I do consider it a little bit more of a turquoise colour. It is a lovely sky blue colour. So for that, I decided I would add this to my favourite blue inks comparison. We'll do a second pass over the top half, just to show the difference between a wet or a broad or a dry or a narrow writing nib. And this is Rohrer and Klingner. And it is Blue Mare. But this is a very nice light blue ink, and it has become one of my favourites. And I did go through, I think, 2 bottles of this, and I'm now on, I'm just looking, I think I'm on my last bottle. So I might have to think about getting another bottle of this ink because it is a favourite ink of mine. The next ink here is a Lamy ink, and it's Lamy Blue. So we'll do an ink swatch. And this is quite a sort of, it goes on a little bit more of a darker blue. I'd say it's definitely got a little bit of a sort of purplish mauve tinge to it. We'll do a second pass over the top half just to show the difference between a wet or a broad or dry or a narrow writing nib. But I do find that this is an interesting blue. I think it's an underrated blue. I think a lot of people don't actually buy the standard like Lamy Blues, the Lamy Greens, uh, and I think that they should. So this is quite simply Lamy Blue, but I have to say, if you're looking for a run-of-the-mill blue ink, this is actually quite a good colour. And typically in the past, the Lamy inks have been actually quite good in terms of price. I know I bought, I think, 3 or 4 bottles of the Lamy Blue when it was being sold on offer on a clear out at Pure Pens before. And I'm really glad that I did, because it's actually a nice blue ink. The next favourite blue ink is Diamine China Blue, and this is I think in 2022 and 2023 has become one of my all-time favourite blue inks. It's just a blue ink that I like a lot, and we'll do an ink swatch here, so you can see that here. Now, I do find this quite a little bit like between a lubricated and a viscous ink. It's not that viscousy. Now, if I do a second pass over the top half, we'll just show the difference between a wet or broad or dry or narrow writing nib. But you can see there, as that ink is going on, it's looking not that dissimilar to Lamy Blue. And it'll be interesting to see, because I've never really actually done a comparison of these two inks side by side. So this is Diamine China Blue, and I've always, this was an ink that I think disappointed me to start with, because I was expecting it to be a lot more like the China Blue colour, but it's an ink that's grown on me because it is a really good blue ink. So from that perspective, it has become one of my favourite blues. The next ink here is KWZ and it's Hawaii Blue, which was exclusively for Hippo Noto. And a friend actually gave me this bottle because I didn't buy the Hippo Noto. I was about to, I think 2018 when it came out, the Hippo Noto notebook, Tomoe with a notebook, but I didn't buy it in the end, partly because of the customs duty and that. But and then they made this ink as well. So this, we'll do an ink swatch here, but this is a lovely blue colour, and I wish I could get another bottle of this because it is quite a nice colour. So we'll do a second pass over the top half, just for the difference between a wet or a broad or a dry or a narrow writing nib. Unfortunately, KWZ and Diamine do a lot of these exclusives, and they won't obviously let you buy the exclusive outside of that market or that retailer, which is a shame, because I would really like to pick up some more bottles of this. So it's probably one I'm just not going to be able to pick up. But this is a KWZ and it's Hawaii Blue. But again, that is a very nice deep blue. I always think of KWZ Hawaii Blue to be a lot more lighter than it actually is. I always think it's going to be a little bit more of a very light blue or turquoisey blue, but it's actually not. The next ink here, which is another favourite, is Diamine Asa Blue. And Asa Blue, or ASA Blue, depending on how you want to say it or pronounce it, this is quite a nice blue. So we'll do an ink swatch here. And again, it is a mid to dark blue, and it is actually quite a nice colour. So we'll do a second pass over the top half, just to show the difference between a wet or a broad or a dry or a narrow writing nib. And I'd have to say that not only with Diamine Asa Blue, but also the KWZ Hawaii, you do see some sheen around the rim of the bottle. So these are inks that can possibly sheen. So this is Diamine Asa Blue. And I say possibly sheen because not all the time will they sheen, unless it's wicked sheen. But I just want to show you around the rim of this bottle there. You can see there is a lot of red sheen. So typically this is one that should sheen quite a bit. And then my last favourite ink in this blue inks comparison video is Pelikan Edelstein Topaz. And this is an ink, again, I've gone through, I think, 2 bottles of this already, and I'm on my 3rd, and I honestly think I need a 4th bottle because this is a favourite blue of mine. So we'll do an ink swatch here. And this is the kind of colour that I think when it goes on of KWZ Hawaii Blue. This is always the colour that I think of. It's a beautiful topaz colour. So we'll do a second pass over the top half just to show the difference between a wet or broad or dry or a narrow writing nib. Now this ink will dry a little bit darker. Not hugely, but it will dry a little bit darker. So we will do an ink writing sample here. So this is Pelikan Edelstein Topaz. But that for me is a beautiful blue ink, and it really is one of my all-time favourite blues because I have gone through so many bottles of that ink. I think let's now take a look at these inks now that they have dried. So the first ink here is Rohrer and Klingner, and it's Blue Mare. And sometimes I associate this as a turquoise ink, sometimes I associate it as a blue ink. It's definitely more the lighter blue, certainly very close to turquoise, so it typically falls in both camps from my perspective. Can you see the difference between a wet or a broad or a dry or a narrow writing nib? You definitely can. There is a huge amount of difference there between the two colours that you can see. Is there shading going on? There is some shading in the pulled area. Not a huge amount, but there is a little bit of shading going on. If I bring it up close, is there any sheen going on? It's difficult to say. I'd say possibly it's trying to sheen right around the edges there, but it's really not doing so, and there's nothing in the writing sample. So I would say that that's probably not going to be a sheening ink. The next ink here is Lamy Blue, and this is, I think, an underrated ink. If you want a typical blue ink, this is probably a decent blue to get. Can you see the difference between a wet or a broad or dry or a narrow writing nib? You definitely can. Again, like Rohrer and Klingner Blue Mare, there's quite a lot of difference there. Can you see any shading? There's definitely shading going on in the pulled area, and there's a little bit of shading on the letter there, but it's a wet writing nib. Is there any sheen going on? No, there really, well, maybe there is a couple of blue or red specks. I know there's a bit of red here as well. So yeah, maybe there is some sheen going on there, but it's a very small amount of sheen. Now, another ink that is very similar is Diamine China Blue, and you can see there in terms of how wet the ink goes on and how dry the ink goes on. So can you see the difference between a wet or a broad or dry and a narrow writing nib? You definitely can. Again, it's quite contrasty there. Can you see shading going on? There's a little bit of shading going on, but it's difficult. It's a little bit blurred shading, so there is some shading there. You can see it maybe a little bit in the writing sample. Is there sheen going on? Yes. Again, around the edges here, there's a little bit of red sheen. So you can get that out of Diamine China Blue, probably as much as Lamy Blue. So if you were to leave that in a pen, either of those in a pen for 2 or 3 months, you probably would see more sheen when the water evaporates out of that ink. The next ink here is KWZ Hawaii Blue, and it's still trying to dry. It's a little bit wet here. Can you see the difference between a wet or broad or dry or a narrow writing nib? You definitely can. I always think Hawaii Blue as being the lighter of the two blues. Is there shading going on? There's definitely some shading going on here in the pulled area that you can see. But there's also sheen going on. There's some red sheen there. And you're not really seeing it yet in the writing sample, but I have seen it in the writing sample before. So there is some red sheen going on there with that one. The next ink here is Diamine Asa Blue. And again, this has been one of my favorites. I always think Asa Blue to be lighter. And I think the reason being is if I show you the bottle there, the label there is a lot lighter than the actual ink. So I always think that this is a lighter blue, but it's more of a darker blue, but I do like it. Can you see the difference between a wet or broad or a dry or a narrow writing nib? You definitely can. Maybe not as much as some of the other inks, but you definitely can see the difference. Is there shading going on? Yeah, there's definitely shading going on in that pulled area. But, however, there is also sheen as well. So the sheen really masks a little bit of that shading that is going on. But, again, it's a little bit wet there at the top left. But it is an interesting sheening blue. And then the last ink here is Pelikan Edelstein Topaz. And this really is my all-time favourite blue. It's bordering on a turquoise, not quite though. It's a light sky blue. I do like it a lot. Can you see the difference between a wet or broad or dry or a narrow writing nib? You definitely can. There's a lot of difference there between the two. Is there shading going on? There's a little bit of shading in the pulled area. I'll show you on the writing sample as well. There's a little bit there. You see on the downstrokes a little bit more shading, but not a massive amount. Is there any sheen? There is a little bit of red sheen around the edges here, again, of that pulled area. So you do get a little bit of sheen there, but it's not really an ink designed to sheen, but it is an ink that will sheen a little bit. So there you have it. That's my favourite blue inks comparison number 2 video. If there are any of these inks that you like, do let me know in the comments below. Likewise, if there are any other blue inks that you would like me to check out, do let me know in the comments below. So that's my favourite blue inks comparison number 2 video. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next pen video. Bye-bye.